The rain hammered against the cracked pavement of downtown Dallas as Jessica Martinez clutched her swollen belly, fighting back tears that mixed with the cold October downpour. At 7 months pregnant with twins, she had been sitting on the same corner for 3 hours, holding a cardboard sign that read, "Pregnant and homeless, please help." The words blurred as raindrops soaked through the thin cardboard, much like how her life had dissolved into this nightmare over the past 2 months. Just 8 weeks ago, Jessica had been living in a modest apartment with her boyfriend Marcus, working as a waitress at a local diner while saving money for the Bobbies. Everything changed when Marcus discovered she was carrying twins instead of the single baby they had planned for. The news terrified him, and instead of stepping up, he packed his bags one morning while she was at work, leaving behind only a note saying he couldn't handle the responsibility. Without his income, Jessica couldn't afford the rent, and despite working double shifts until her pregnancy made it impossible, she found herself evicted with nowhere to go. The shelter system was overwhelmed, with waiting lists stretching for months. Jessica spent her first week sleeping in her car until it was repossessed for missed payments. She had swallowed her pride and called her estranged mother in Phoenix, only to be told that there was no room for her and that she should have thought about consequences before getting pregnant. Her father had died 3 years earlier, and her only sibling, a brother in the military, was deployed overseas. Friends from work offered couches for a night or two, but nobody could take in a pregnant woman long term. Now, as business people hurried past with umbrellas and averted eyes, Jessica felt the Bobbies moving restlessly inside her, as if they too sensed the desperation of their situation. Her back ached from sitting on the cold concrete, and her feet were swollen beyond recognition in shoes that no longer fit properly. She had managed to collect $12.37 throughout the day, enough for a cheap meal but nowhere near enough for a motel room. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was begging for help in one of the wealthiest areas of Dallas, surrounded by gleaming office buildings and expensive restaurants. She had chosen this spot because she remembered reading somewhere that affluent areas yielded better results for panhandlers. But so far, most people treated her like she was invisible. A few had dropped coins without making eye contact, and one businessman had stopped to lecture her about personal responsibility before walking away without offering any assistance. As the afternoon wore on and the rain intensified, Jessica began to wonder if she would spend another night huddled in the doorway of a closed shop, trying to protect her unborn children from the elements. She had never imagined that her life could unravel so completely, so quickly. The Bobbies kicked again, and she whispered an apology to them, promising she would find a way to give them the life they deserved, even if she had no idea how. The sound of slow footsteps approaching made her look up through the rain, hoping for another potential donor. What she saw was a tall figure in a worn cowboy hat, walking deliberately toward her corner. Unlike the others who had passed by, this man seemed to be heading directly to her, his steady gait unchanged by the weather. Jessica straightened up as much as her condition allowed, preparing to make her case once more, unaware that her life was about to change in ways she never could have imagined. Thomas "Tom" Patterson had been driving his pickup truck through downtown Dallas when he spotted the pregnant woman on the corner. At 55 years old, the former rodeo rider turned ranch hand had seen his share of hardship, but something about the sight of a heavily pregnant woman sitting in the rain stopped him cold. He pulled over 3 blocks away, parked his truck, and walked back through the downpour to get a better look at the situation. Tom had grown up on his family's ranch outside of Fort Worth, raised by parents who believed in helping those in need without asking questions. His father had once taken in a family of strangers during a tornado, and his mother had never turned away anyone who came to their door hungry. Those lessons had stayed with him through his years on the rodeo circuit, through his marriage and divorce, and through the quiet life he now led working on the Henderson Ranch. As he approached Jessica, Tom noticed several things that the hurried passers-by had missed. Her clothes, while soaked and worn, were clean and well-maintained. Her shoes, though too small, were practical rather than flashy. Most importantly, there was a dignity in how she sat, a quiet desperation that spoke of someone who had fallen on hard times rather than someone who had chosen this lifestyle. His experience with people, honed through years of working with both horses and ranch hands, told him this woman was genuinely in need. "Ma'am," Tom said, his voice barely audible over the rain as he approached her corner. Jessica looked up, surprised by the gentle tone and the fact that someone had actually spoken to her rather than just dropping money and walking away. The cowboy's face was weathered and kind, with deep lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent squinting into the sun and wind. "I don't mean to intrude," Tom continued, crouching down to her level despite the rain soaking through his jeans. "But sitting out here in this weather can't be good for you or your bobbies. When's the last time you had a hot meal and a dry place to sleep?" Jessica's lower lip trembled as she tried to respond. She had been asked for her story dozens of times that day, mostly by people who seemed to be judging whether she was worthy of their spare change. But something in Tom's eyes was different. There was no judgment, only genuine concern. "2 days ago," she managed to whisper, her voice hoarse from the cold and rain, "I had enough for a motel room 2 nights ago." Tom nodded slowly, processing the information. He had made his decision the moment he saw her, but he wanted to understand what he was getting into. "You got family around here?" "No, sir," Jessica replied, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Nobody who can help anyway." Tom stood up, water dripping from the brim of his hat. "Well then, I reckon you better come with me. I got a warm truck and a place where you can get dry and get some food in you." Jessica stared at him in disbelief. In her weeks on the street, she had learned to be wary of offers that seemed too good to be true. Men who offered help to vulnerable women often had ulterior motives, and she had already turned down several propositions that made her skin crawl. "I appreciate the offer," she said carefully, "but I don't know you and I can't put my bobbies at risk." Tom understood her hesitation and respected it. "Name's Tom Patterson. I work at the Henderson Ranch about 40 miles north of here. I got a small cabin on the property, and Mrs. Henderson, she's the ranch owner. She's been looking for someone to help with light housework since her arthritis got bad. Nothing fancy, just cooking and cleaning in exchange for room and board." He reached into his wallet and pulled out a business card for the Henderson Ranch, along with his driver's license. "You can call the ranch and ask about me if you want, or I can drive you to the police station first so you can check me out. I got 2 grown daughters, and I wouldn't want them sitting out here in weather like this." Jessica looked at the identification, noting that Tom's address was indeed listed as the Henderson Ranch. The business card appeared legitimate, with a phone number and website. Still, years of watching true crime shows had taught her to be cautious. "Why would you help a stranger?" she asked, studying his face for any sign of deception. Tom was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to explain something that seemed as natural to him as breathing. "Because someone needs help and I'm able to give it. That's reason enough for me." The simple honesty of his answer, combined with the genuine kindness in his eyes, made Jessica's decision for her. She was tired of being cold, tired of being hungry, and tired of worrying about her Bobby's safety. If this man meant her harm, at least she would be warm and fed when she found out. "Okay," she said, struggling to get to her feet, "but I want to call the ranch first." Tom immediately moved to help her up, steadying her with a gentle hand on her elbow. "Of course, we can call from my truck where it's warm." As they walked slowly toward his pickup, Jessica wondered if she was making a terrible mistake, or if this cowboy might actually be the answer to her desperate prayers. The bobbies seemed to sense her change in mood, settling down as she got out of the rain for the first time in hours. Tom opened the passenger door for her and helped her climb into the cab, which smelled like leather and hay, honest, working smells that somehow made her feel safer. "There's a thermos of coffee in there if you want some," Tom said as he started the engine and turned the heat up high. "And I got some crackers in the glove compartment." Jessica's hands shook as she poured the coffee, the warmth spreading through her chilled fingers. She couldn't remember the last time someone had shown her such simple kindness, without expecting anything in return. As Tom handed her his cell phone to call the ranch, she found herself hoping that this wasn't just another cruel twist in her already difficult journey. The phone rang 3 times before a woman's voice answered. Henderson Ranch, this is Margaret speaking. Hello, Mrs. Henderson, Jessica said, her voice still shaky. I'm calling to ask about Tom Patterson. He's offered to help me, and I wanted to make sure he really works for you. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Tom. Oh, honey, that man is salt of the earth. He's been with us for 8 years now, and he's the most honest, hard-working person you'll ever meet. Are you in some kind of trouble? Jessica glanced at Tom, who was staring straight ahead at the road, giving her privacy for the conversation. I'm pregnant and homeless, ma'am. Mr. Patterson found me on the street and offered to help. Well, I'll be, Margaret said, her voice warming with understanding. That sounds exactly like something Tom would do. You know, I've been needing help around the house, and I've got a nice little apartment above the garage that's been sitting empty. If you're willing to work, we might be able to help each other out. Jessica felt tears spring to her eyes, but for the first time in months, they weren't tears of despair. Are you serious? Dead serious, honey. When can you start? Jessica looked at Tom, who was watching her with a small smile on his weathered face. I think I can start right now if that's okay. Perfect. Tell Tom to bring you straight to the house. We'll get you settled in and fed, and then we can talk about the details. As Jessica hung up the phone, she realized that her life had just taken a dramatic turn for the better. The man sitting next to her had literally saved her and her bobbies from a life on the streets, and he had done it without fanfare or expectation of reward. She had heard about guardian angels, but had never believed in them until now. Mrs. Henderson seems very nice, Jessica said, handing the phone back to Tom. She's good people, Tom replied, pulling out into traffic. Her husband passed about 5 years ago, and she's been running the ranch mostly on her own since then. She's got help with the livestock, but the house is getting to be too much for her to handle alone. As they drove north toward the ranch, Jessica felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. She was grateful beyond words for this opportunity, but she also knew that she couldn't mess it up. This job might be her only chance to provide a stable home for her bobbies, and she was determined to prove herself worthy of Tom's faith in her. The rain began to let up as they left the city behind, and through the windshield, Jessica could see rolling hills and pastures stretching out in all directions. She had grown up in the suburbs and had never lived in the country, but something about the wide open spaces made her feel like she could breathe again. "What's Mrs. Henderson like?" she asked, wanting to know what to expect. Tom thought for a moment. "She's fair and kind, but she doesn't suffer fools gladly. She'll appreciate hard work and honesty, but she won't put up with drama or laziness. If you do right by her, she'll do right by you." Jessica nodded, filing away the information. She had always been a hard worker, and honesty had never been a problem for her. Drama was the last thing she wanted in her life right now. As they turned onto a gravel road marked with a wooden sign reading, Henderson Ranch, Jessica felt a sense of coming home that she hadn't experienced in months. The main house was a large, two-story structure with a wraparound porch and dormer windows. Behind it, she could see a barn and several outbuildings, including what appeared to be a garage with an apartment above it. Tom parked near the front porch, and before Jessica could struggle out of the truck on her own, he was around to help her down. The front door opened, and a woman in her 70s emerged, moving slowly but with purpose. Margaret Henderson was smaller than Jessica had expected, but there was a strength in her bearing that spoke of years of hard work and determination. "You must be Jessica," Margaret said, extending her hand with a warm smile. "Welcome to Henderson Ranch." Margaret Henderson had been expecting another young woman looking for easy work and quick money, but one look at Jessica told her this was something entirely different. The girl, and at 24, she was still a girl in Margaret's eyes, was clearly at the end of her rope. Her clothes were damp and wrinkled. Her hair was pulled back in a makeshift ponytail, and there were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of many sleepless nights. But what impressed Margaret most was the way Jessica looked her directly in the eye when they shook hands, and how she immediately began to speak about her qualifications and willingness to work hard. There was no self-pity, no dramatic sob story, just a straightforward explanation of her situation and a genuine desire to prove herself. "I've worked in restaurants for 6 years," Jessica said as Margaret led her into the house. "I know how to cook for large groups, and I'm good with cleaning and organizing. I'll do whatever you need me to do." The interior of the house was warm and welcoming, with hardwood floors and comfortable furniture that showed signs of being well loved rather than merely expensive. Family photos covered the mantel, and Jessica could see that this was a home where people had lived and loved for many years. "The work isn't difficult," Margaret explained as she led Jessica through the house. "I need someone to help with cooking. I still make meals for the ranch hands during busy seasons. There's laundry, light cleaning, and general organizing. Nothing too strenuous, especially with you being pregnant." They climbed the stairs to the second floor, where Margaret showed Jessica the guest room she could use until the apartment was ready. The room was simple but clean, with a comfortable bed and a window that looked out over the pastures. "The apartment above the garage needs some work," Margaret continued. "Tom's been fixing it up in his spare time, but it's not quite ready yet. You're welcome to stay in here until it's finished." Jessica sat down on the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the kindness she was being shown. "Mrs. Henderson, I don't know how to thank you. I was so scared about what was going to happen to my Bobbies." Margaret sat down beside her, her expression softening. "Honey, I was young and scared once too. My husband and I struggled for years before this ranch became successful. I remember what it's like to wonder where your next meal is coming from." "I promise I won't let you down," Jessica said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll work harder than anyone you've ever hired." "I believe you will," Margaret replied. "Now when are those bobbies due?" "January 15th, Jessica said, placing her hands on her belly. "I'm having twins, both girls." Margaret's eyes lit up. "Twins! How wonderful! We'll need to make sure that apartment is set up properly for Bobby's. Tom mentioned that their father isn't in the picture." Jessica's face darkened slightly. "He left when he found out it was twins. Said he couldn't handle the responsibility." "Well, his loss is our gain," Margaret said firmly. "Those little girls are going to grow up surrounded by people who care about them. This ranch has always been a place where families are made, not just born." Over the next several hours, Margaret showed Jessica around the entire property, explaining her duties and introducing her to the ranch hands. Everyone she met was polite and welcoming, though Jessica could sense they were reserving judgment until they saw how she worked out. Tom had disappeared to work on the apartment, and Jessica could hear him moving around upstairs in the garage, presumably making repairs and improvements. She was touched that he was taking time from his own work to prepare a home for her and her bobbies. That evening, Margaret invited Jessica to eat dinner with her in the main house. The meal was simple but delicious: pot roast with vegetables and homemade bread. As they ate, Margaret shared stories about the ranch's history and her late husband's dream of creating a place where people could find honest work and dignity. "Robert always said that a ranch should be more than just a business," Margaret explained. "He wanted it to be a place where people could build lives and raise families. That's why we've got Tom's cabin and why we built the apartment above the garage. Sometimes people need a fresh start." Jessica listened carefully, understanding that she was being given more than just a job. She was being offered a chance to become part of something bigger than herself. The responsibility felt heavy, but also hopeful. "What happened to your husband?" Jessica asked gently. Margaret's face grew sad but peaceful. "Cancer. He fought it for 2 years, but in the end his body just couldn't take any more. He died knowing that I would keep the ranch going and that Tom would help me do it." "You must miss him terribly." "Every day," Margaret admitted. "But I've learned that the best way to honor someone's memory is to continue their work. Robert wanted this place to be a sanctuary for people who needed one, and that's what it's going to remain." As the evening wound down, Jessica felt a contentment she hadn't experienced in months. She had a warm, safe place to sleep, food in her stomach, and the promise of honest work. Most importantly, she had hope for her daughter's future. Tom knocked on the door just as they were finishing dinner. "Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to let you know that the apartment should be ready by the weekend. I've got new paint going up tomorrow, and I'll have the kitchen appliances hooked up by Friday." "That's wonderful, Tom," Margaret said. "Jessica, why don't you go up and take a look at what's going to be your new home?" Jessica followed Tom out to the garage, her heart pounding with excitement. The apartment was accessed by an external staircase, and Tom unlocked the door with a key he handed to her. "It's not much," he said as they stepped inside, "but it's clean and safe." Jessica looked around the small space with wonder. There was a combined living room and kitchen area, a bedroom, and a bathroom. The walls were freshly painted in a warm cream color, and the hardwood floors had been refinished. It was small, but it was perfect for a mother with two Bobbies. "Tom, this is beautiful," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I can't believe you've done all this work." "Mrs. Henderson wanted it done right," Tom replied, embarrassed by her gratitude. "Besides, I like having projects to work on in the evenings." Jessica walked to the window and looked out over the ranch, lights twinkling in the distance. For the first time since Marcus had left, she could envision a future for herself and her daughters. They would be safe here, surrounded by good people who cared about them. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you and Mrs. Henderson for this," she said. Tom was quiet for a moment, then said, "The best way to repay kindness is to pass it on when you get the chance. Mrs. Henderson and we've both been helped by others when we needed it. Now we're in a position to help someone else." As they walked back to the main house, Jessica realized that she had stumbled into something remarkable. She had found not just a job and a place to live, but a community of people who believed in taking care of each other. Her daughters would grow up understanding that the world could be a cruel place, but that there were still good people in it who would help those in need. That night, as she lay in the comfortable guest room bed, Jessica felt her bobbies moving peacefully inside her. She placed her hands on her belly and whispered to them about their new home, about the kind people who had taken them in, and about the bright future that lay ahead. The next morning, Jessica woke before dawn, eager to begin her new life. She dressed quickly and made her way to the kitchen, where she found Margaret already up and making coffee. "You're an early riser," Margaret observed with approval. "That's good. Ranch life starts early." "I want to earn my keep," Jessica said, accepting a cup of coffee gratefully. "What would you like me to start with?" Margaret smiled. "Well, the ranch hands will be looking for breakfast in about an hour. Think you can handle cooking for 8 hungry men?" Jessica's eyes lit up. "Absolutely. Just show me where everything is." As Margaret gave her a tour of the kitchen and pantry, Jessica felt a familiar confidence returning. She had always been good at her job, and cooking for a crowd was something she could do in her sleep. This was her chance to prove that Tom and Margaret's faith in her had been well placed. By the time the ranch hands arrived for breakfast, Jessica had prepared a full spread: scrambled eggs, bacon, sausage, hash browns, biscuits, and gravy. The men were initially surprised to see a new face in the kitchen, but their skepticism quickly turned to appreciation when they tasted the food. "Ma'am, this is the best breakfast I've had in months," said Jake, the ranch foreman. "Mrs. Henderson's been trying to cook for us, but her arthritis makes it hard for her to stand at the stove for long periods." Jessica felt a surge of pride and purpose. She was making a real difference already, helping both Margaret and the hardworking men who kept the ranch running. As she cleaned up after breakfast, she began to plan the day's other meals and think about ways she could improve the efficiency of the kitchen. Margaret watched her work with growing satisfaction. The girl was clearly experienced and competent, but more than that, she seemed to understand the importance of taking care of people. That was something that couldn't be taught. It had to come from the heart. "Jessica," Margaret called out as she was wiping down the last of the breakfast dishes, "I want you to know that I'm already impressed with your work. You've got good instincts, and you're not afraid to jump in and get things done." Jessica beamed at the praise. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. I love cooking for people, and I want to make sure everyone feels taken care of." "Well, you're certainly doing that," Margaret said. "Now, I don't want you overdoing it in your condition. Make sure you take breaks and put your feet up when you need to." As the days passed, Jessica settled into a rhythm at the ranch. She prepared meals for the ranch hands, helped Margaret with household tasks, and spent her evenings getting the apartment ready for the Bobbies. Tom had installed a crib that he had built himself, and Margaret had contributed baby clothes and supplies that she had been saving from when her own children were small. The other ranch hands gradually warmed up to Jessica, appreciating not just her cooking but her friendly demeanor and willingness to help wherever needed. She learned their names and preferences, making sure that Jake got extra coffee because he was diabetic and needed the caffeine to manage his blood sugar, and that Miguel got his eggs over easy because that's how his grandmother had made them. Word of Jessica's situation and the kindness shown by Tom and Margaret spread throughout the small farming community. People began stopping by with donations of baby supplies, maternity clothes, and offers of help. Jessica was amazed by the generosity of strangers who had heard her story and wanted to contribute to her success. One afternoon, as Jessica was preparing lunch, a social worker named Amanda Collins arrived at the ranch. Jessica's heart sank, fearing that someone had reported her situation and that she might lose her bobbies or be forced to leave the ranch. "I'm here to check on your living situation," Amanda explained, her manner professional but kind. "We received a call from someone expressing concern about a pregnant, homeless woman." Jessica showed Amanda around the apartment, which was now fully furnished and ready for occupancy. She explained her work arrangement with Margaret and provided documentation of her employment and housing situation. Amanda was clearly impressed by what she saw. "This is exactly the kind of stable environment we hope to see for expectant mothers," she said. "You're very fortunate to have found such supportive people." "I know," Jessica replied. "Tom and Mrs. Henderson saved my life, and I'm determined to make the most of this opportunity." Amanda completed her report and assured Jessica that there were no concerns about her situation. In fact, she left contact information for resources that could help with prenatal care and preparation for the Bobby's arrival. As Jessica's pregnancy progressed, she found herself becoming an integral part of the ranch community. Margaret treated her like a daughter, offering advice and support as she prepared for motherhood. Tom continued to be a steady, reliable presence, always ready to help with practical matters or just to listen when she needed to talk. The ranch hands, initially skeptical of having a pregnant woman around, had become protective of her and excited about the Bobby's arrival. They had started a betting pool about the exact date and time of birth, with the winner receiving a steak dinner cooked by Jessica. One evening in late December, as Jessica was putting the finishing touches on the nursery, she felt the first contractions. They were mild at first, but gradually became stronger and more regular. Margaret called the doctor, who confirmed that Jessica was in early labor. "It's time," Margaret announced, her voice filled with excitement and concern. "Tom, get the truck ready. We're going to have some bobbies tonight." The drive to the hospital was a blur of contractions and encouragement from Margaret, who held Jessica's hand and reminded her to breathe. Tom drove with the steady competence of someone who had dealt with emergency situations before, getting them to the hospital safely and quickly. 12 hours later, Jessica gave birth to two healthy baby girls, Emma Rose and Sophia Grace. As she held her daughters for the first time, Jessica thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. 6 months ago, she had been homeless and desperate, sitting on a street corner in the rain. Now she was a mother with a stable home, a job she loved, and a community of people who cared about her family. Tom and Margaret were the first visitors allowed into the recovery room, and their faces lit up when they saw the Bobbies. Margaret immediately began making plans for their homecoming, while Tom stood quietly by the window, a soft smile on his weathered face. "What are you thinking about?" Jessica asked him. "Just that everything worked out the way it was supposed to," Tom replied. "These little girls are going to grow up surrounded by love and good people. That's all any parent can ask for." As Jessica watched Tom and Margaret cooing over her daughters, she realized that she had found something she had never expected: a family. Not the traditional kind she had always imagined, but something even better: a chosen family of people who had come together to support each other through life's challenges. The Bobbies thrived in their new environment, and Jessica quickly established herself as an indispensable member of the ranch community. She continued to cook for the ranch hands, who competed for the privilege of babysitting Emma and Sophia. Margaret doted on the girls like a grandmother, and Tom built them a playground behind the garage apartment. As the twins grew, they became the heart of the ranch. Ranch hands would time their breaks to coincide with Jessica bringing the Bobbies outside, and Margaret's arthritis seemed to improve whenever she was holding one of the girls. The entire community had invested in their success, and everyone took pride in watching them develop and thrive. One day, when the twins were 6 months old, Jessica received an unexpected visit from Marcus. He had heard through mutual friends about her situation and wanted to see the Bobbies. Jessica was torn between anger at his abandonment and curiosity about what he had to say. "I made a mistake," Marcus said, standing awkwardly in the ranch's main yard. "I was scared and I panicked. I want to be part of their lives now." Jessica looked at him with a mixture of sadness and pity. "Marcus, you gave up your right to be part of their lives when you walked away. These girls have never known a day without love and support, and I'm not going to disrupt that now." "But I'm their father," Marcus protested. "I have rights." "You have the right to pay child support," Jessica said firmly. "That's about all you have a right to at this point. You can't just show up and expect to be welcomed back into our lives." Tom, who had been working nearby, approached the conversation. He didn't say anything, but his presence was a clear signal that Jessica had support if she needed it. Marcus looked around at the ranch, taking in the obvious signs of prosperity and stability. "This isn't what I expected," he said. "No," Jessica agreed. "It's better. These girls are growing up in a place where people keep their commitments and take care of each other. That's something you never understood." Marcus left that day without meeting his daughters, and Jessica never heard from him again. She was relieved that he had chosen not to complicate their lives, but also sad that he would never know the amazing little people his daughters were becoming. As the twins approached their first birthday, Jessica realized that she had built the life she had always dreamed of, just not in the way she had expected. She had a career she loved, a home that was truly hers, and a community of people who had become her family. Most importantly, her daughters were growing up surrounded by love and the knowledge that there were good people in the world who would help those in need. The ranch continued to thrive, with Jessica's contributions helping to make it more efficient and welcoming. She had expanded her role to include managing the ranch's finances and coordinating with suppliers, proving that her skills extended far beyond the kitchen. Margaret's health had improved significantly since Jessica's arrival, partly due to the reduced workload, but mostly due to the joy that Emma and Sophia brought to her life. She often said that the girls had given her a reason to keep going after Robert's death, and that Jessica had become the daughter she had always wanted. Tom remained the steady, reliable presence he had always been, but Jessica could see how much the girls meant to him. He had become their honorary grandfather, teaching them about animals and nature, and always ready with a story or a gentle word when they needed comfort. As Jessica looked back on her journey from homelessness to stability, she realized that her experience had taught her valuable lessons about resilience, kindness, and the importance of community. She had learned that sometimes the worst moments in life can lead to the best outcomes, and that there are still people in the world who will help strangers without expecting anything in return. The ranch had become more than just a place to work and live. It had become a testament to the power of human kindness and the importance of giving people second chances. Jessica knew that someday, when she was in a position to help others, she would pass on the kindness that had been shown to her, just as Tom had predicted. Emma and Sophia would grow up hearing the story of how their mother had been rescued from the streets by a cowboy who asked for nothing in return, and how a ranch owner had given them a chance at a better life. They would understand that their good fortune came with a responsibility to help others, and that the cycle of kindness must continue. As the sun set over the Henderson Ranch on the twins' first birthday, Jessica stood on the porch of her apartment, watching Tom and Margaret play with the girls in the yard below. The scene was perfect in its simplicity, a family brought together not by blood, but by love and mutual support. She thought about that rainy day in Dallas when she had been sitting on a street corner, desperate and alone. She could never have imagined that her lowest moment would lead to her greatest blessing. The cowboy who had stopped to help her had given her far more than shelter and a job. He had given her a future filled with hope and possibility. The twins giggled as Tom pushed them on the swing set he had built, their laughter carrying across the ranch and filling Jessica's heart with joy. This was what happiness looked like, not the dramatic, overwhelming emotion she had expected, but a quiet contentment that came from knowing she was exactly where she belonged. Margaret called up from the yard, "Jessica, come down here and help us with the birthday cake." Jessica smiled and made her way down the stairs, ready to celebrate another milestone in their extraordinary journey. As she joined her chosen family in the yard, she whispered a prayer of gratitude for the cowboy who had changed her life, the ranch owner who had given her a chance, and the community that had embraced her and her daughters. The Henderson Ranch had become more than just a place to live and work. It had become a symbol of hope for anyone who had ever felt lost or alone. And Jessica Martinez, once a homeless pregnant woman begging on the streets of Dallas, had become living proof that sometimes, when everything seems hopeless, help can come from the most unexpected places. The story of the pregnant woman and the cowboy spread throughout the farming community and beyond, inspiring others to look for opportunities to help those in need. Jessica often received letters from people who had heard her story and wanted to share their own experiences of unexpected kindness. Some wrote to tell her about times when strangers had helped them through difficult periods, while others wrote to say that her story had inspired them to be more generous with their own resources. Jessica kept all of these letters, planning to share them with Emma and Sophia when they were older, so they could understand the impact that one act of kindness can have on the world. The ranch itself had become a model for other agricultural operations, demonstrating that businesses could be both profitable and compassionate. Margaret and Jessica had worked together to create a program that provided temporary housing and work opportunities for people experiencing homelessness, with Tom serving as a mentor and guide for newcomers. Several other families had found stability through the program, and Jessica took special pride in being able to help others the way she had been helped. She understood better than anyone how important it was to have someone believe in you when you couldn't believe in yourself. As Emma and Sophia grew from toddlers to young children, they absorbed the values of the ranch community without even realizing it. They learned to be kind to animals, to help with chores, and to welcome newcomers with open arms. Their natural generosity and compassion reflected the environment in which they were being raised. Jessica often found herself amazed by the resilience and adaptability of children.